Yu Yu Hakusho is an anime packed full of interesting villains, whether they're the lead antagonists or just a dude who sticks around for less than an episode, they tend to make a lasting impression. In previous videos, we've covered the series' final boss villains and the one-off villains who are on the lower level of the power scale, but now it's time to cover the in-between of those villains, the number 2s. These are the opponents who weren't at the end of the line, but also weren't just supposed to be one of those small villains whose only an introductory fight. Some of them may have even worked as the final boss if there weren't stronger or smarter fighters behind them. They're sort of like the sub-boss of their team or arc, being the big challenge before the last fighter. I'd also call them secondary villains, but some of them play a much bigger role than just being secondary, and some of them are not villains. They're just fighting against Team Urameshi and are merely in the way of them saving the world, so secondary villain is just a simplification term. The point is, these opponents were sometimes antagonistic and were one of the big fights before the final boss, and not always the second to last fight. They could have just been a big fight in the middle. Also, to help me out with this topic is the sub-boss of co-hosts, NegetiveX.
I myself was a sub-boss. At least that's what I tell myself to make me feel better about all the beatings.
So does that put you at the level of what, one of Kuwabara's friends?
Yeah, not quite Kuwabara level, but someday.
Now let's match up the top 10 secondary villains or sub-bosses in Yu Yu Hakusho. Number 10, Itsuki, aka Gatekeeper. Itsuki is a cool villain since he's not here to be violent. He's essentially the bodyguard for main villain Sensui in the Chapter Black arc. This is when former spirit detective Sensui has a plan to break the barrier between the human and demon world since he's lost faith in humanity as a whole after seeing the torment that wealthy humans expose demons to in his youth. He gathers allies who have seen the Chapter Black tape, which shows the atrocities committed by humans over the millennia. Seeing it can cause a person to go mad and turn against society, so Sensui's gang was mostly made up of humans who were jaded by humanity because of it, plus a kid with psychic powers who he thought would be useful for his plan, and a demon he met when he was a spirit detective named Itsuki. Together, they form the Sensui 7. While the 5 other humans of the group were active in the field to hinder the heroes, Itsuki stayed by Sensui's side the whole time, not revealing his powers until Sensui's plan was about to go into motion. He can control the demons behind the barrier, keeping them at bay or making them unruly if he wanted to intimidate. More importantly, he can retreat easily by fading in and out of hard surfaces by going into pocket dimensions, with his most notable one being behind a giant shadow face, which allows him and anyone else in the dimension to gaze into the main world.
I have to say, when he's just a shadow on the wall though, ooh. I mean, it's memorable and it's creepy and it's so good and I love it because it makes me so uncomfortable.
Itsuki takes the heroes into this dimension that aren't Yusuke so they don't interfere with Sensui's main fight, and it allows him to give exposition to everyone without being in the way. The only way to escape it is to be Kuwabara, who can cut through territories with enough willpower because he's Kuwabara. He's hard-headed enough to get through anything supernatural with force. Okay, it has to do with his spirit energy, but I think that explanation is also fitting. What's most interesting to me, though, is his past. Sensui was about to kill him when he used to be a spirit detective, but when giving Itsuki one last request before death, Itsuki responds that he wants to live to see the finale of his favorite TV show that will be on tomorrow, which is a show that Sensui also watched, so this started their friendship. Itsuki eventually fell in love with Sensui, but Sensui was such an enigma, it was hard to tell how he views their relationship or if he truly loved him back, so at the very least, they are confidants who can trust each other more than anyone else on the team.
He loves Sensui. I mean, who wouldn't love Sensui? I guess maybe people. Yeah, I guess, if you didn't want the world to end.
Itsuki doesn't really care about breaking the barrier on his own. He just wanted to do whatever made Sensui happy, and if it's ending humanity, then he'll do what he needs to. Number 9, Rinku. Rinku was a part of Team Rakuyakai, the first team that Team Urameshi fought in the Dark Tournament. We kinda wanted to put their temporary leader Zero on this list, but he was already on my one-off Yu Yu Hakusho villain list, so for the sake of not having a character on both of these lists, we'll give it to the character that lasted the second longest of the team, Rinku. Zero's fight didn't even last a full episode anyway. He makes a threatening remark the day before the tournament, breaks a teacup, and then Hiei lets him get in a hit for free so Hiei can activate his own fire dragon, ironically incinerating Zero. That's all we saw from him. He's not not that tough. Okay, he's pretty tough. NegetiveX, you can now monologue about him before I talk about Rinku, since I know you still really wanted to put Zero on this list too.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Zero for it, because Hiei actually had to use the Dragon of the Darkness Flame, which is also supposed to be this legendary move that, it's questionable whether he can even control it. So it feels like, despite him only being in like half an episode before it gets burnt to a crisp, it took a major move. He didn't stop fighting because he got annoyed because he couldn't defeat the other person. He had to get hit by the ultimate attack.
I guess Rinku's main advantage over Zero was just getting that to be continued break in the middle of his fight, making him seem more prolific with extra screen time. Plus, Rinku was a good villain to start off the tournament with, since he showed us that demons are not always big scary monsters, and they can be reasonable. You can talk to them normally. Part of his advantage was because he was fighting Kuwabara, since he drastically underestimated Rinku for being a child, right? I know he's a demon, but he shows no demon properties outside of having demon yo-yos. Is he part of a species that just so happens to look like human children, or is he a demon kid?
I thought he was a child. I mean, look at him. It looks like he's in elementary school with that hat. And he's playing with yo-yos. I feel like that was supposed to be a much younger kid. A much younger demon. Although, who knows, because demons could be, I don't know how old. I don't know how quick demons age.
Still not sure, since he's listed as being over 200 years old, but he could also just be a demon who ages slowly. But he backs up his childlike confidence with his fighting style, which, as mentioned, are yo-yos with demon energy. These yo-yos move like snakes on their own, with Rinku piloting them. They have the sneakiness of a serpent mixed with the techniques of a yo-yo. Despite having erratic movements, they still function like the toys should. Rinku attacks with more deadly versions of yo-yo tricks, like walking the dog that will just ram ya, or around the world that turns you into the yo-yo and he swings you around when the strings are tied to you, and then he slams you to the ground, which I don't think is based on any official yo-yo techniques, but while he has you tied up, he might as well do that. He can overall control 8 at a time in the Dark Tournament. He ends up beating Kuwabara, but it was a challenge for him solely because Kuwabara is resilient. He just keeps getting up, even after he's defeated by Ring Out. Rinku is even like, dude, leave me alone, when Kuwabara pursues him to fight afterwards. With Rinku just being mischievous but not malicious, he gains respect for Team Urameshi and ultimately joins the hero faction in the last arc of the series. When there's a power struggle on who's going to become the Demon King, Kurama tries to show his worth to one of the head demons by training a bunch of the demons they fought in the Dark Tournament to upgrade their power, including Rinku.
He got heavier yo-yos or something. That's all he needed.
He just ties more yo-yos to his toes to double the amount of yo-yos he can use.
Oh wow, that is... Use the feet, Rinku.
The plot of that arc evolved into a free-for-all tournament to determine the Demon King, so we got to see a bit more yo-yo action, and then Rinku was defeated off-screen. But still, more yo-yo action. Number 8, Shigure. The final arc of Yu Yu Hakusho, the Three Kings arc, went by fast, and despite it being considered the weakest of the arcs in the anime due to the pacing issues, I always enjoy it on the rewatch. The characters have so much going on visually in the three factions, but most of them just get introduced to do one cool thing and then leave, if that. You got the monks, the guy with the mask, the guy with the trident, and even Yomi's son doesn't do too much. Though Natsume had a great showing despite being a character who showed up out of nowhere. However, one character who was second in command in one of the factions, who did get a proper backstory and tough fights, was the man with the ring blade, Shigure. Shigure is the master demon surgeon who gave Hiei his Jigan Eye. He can give you any demon powers or appendages for a price beyond money, usually involving giving up your strength for a period of time. But he's also a master swordsman, useful for Makuro's territory. But he doesn't like a straight sword. He wants his sword to be curved, real curved. He uses a ring blade that goes around his whole body, a unique weapon indeed. Even though we see him performing surgery with normal tools, I imagine him doing it with the comically oversized ring blade, like that Family Guy gag where Luke Skywalker performs LASIK eye surgery with a lightsaber.
I'm just imagining, like, they're in an operation or something like that, and the nurse is there, and he's just like, I need the ring blade, stat. And it's just the nurse pans over and looks at the tray of tools, and it's just one giant ring, and that's it. It's the only tool, and she hands him the one thing. She's just like, man, this is really kind of unnecessary. I don't know why I'm here. We would give you anesthesia, but I spent all this money on this wicked ring blade. It's like, what if I paid extra? Then could you buy some? No, I'm sorry. I spent all the extra on the ring blade. blade. I do like that Shigure really likes to dish out his operations based on the irony of the people who want it. Like, he only accepts ironic payments. You know, when Hiei comes in, he's like, man, I need to do this to see my sister. He's like, I'll only do it if you never see your sister again. No more money needed. Just that little bit of irony.
Shigure has the honor of being a major fight for two main characters. He first fights Hiei when Makuro sets up a test of strength for Hiei, and then Kurama in the tournament to determine the king. The fight versus Hiei is a classic samurai movie fight, where they both run into each other with their blades out, and we only see the aftermath, where one falls with a fake out. Hiei looks like he's going to be the one to go down, but then half of Shigure's head falls off, and Shigure was pretty cool with it. Nothing about him ever seemed evil. Like, he wants to win, he's not going to go easy on you, but if you beat him, he's got no problem taking that L. We see a slow-mo instant replay of how the only way Hiei was able to beat Shigure was by running his own arm right into the ring blade so he could get close enough to strike Shigure. It shows how skilled Shigure is, that you have no chance to defeat him unless you risk a serious injury yourself. Apparently though, losing half your head isn't fatal, since Shigure gets repaired and was ready to fight Kurama in the tournament at the end of the series, where we see the true extent of his ring blade skills. He can throw it like a boomerang and it comes back to him at the most inopportune time for the opponent, or he can just throw it and it magically returns to him when we're not looking, and it explodes because dramatic. Finally, he can create a tornado with it and sort of surf in the middle of the tornado. The tornado also destroys everything in its path, so the winds it creates feel like they're as sharp as the blade itself. He ultimately lost a close one against Kurama thanks to his extreme planning with his demon plants, but once again, Shigure kept us on our toes with a match that could have gone either way.
He's the sub-boss that just won't die. I'm not crazy, like, I felt like I missed something when I saw him come back again. I was like, wait a second, didn't he die? He just didn't need that part of his head.
Number 7, Jin. Nothing about Jin is villainous, but for the sake of discussing him as the fight before the final boss of Team Masho in the Dark Tournament, he fills the role of a sub-boss fight well, and if he beat Yusuke in that fight, no one would have been able to stop Toguro, and the series would have looked very different, so he is technically working against the heroes in the Dark Tournament, making him a temporary antagonist. Regardless of his alignment when we meet him, I like from the moment he appears, he's got a good guy vibe, seeming pretty jolly, and getting angry at his teammates when higher powers try to fix the fights in his team's favor, sitting out until he can fight Yusuke. That being said, he still didn't really care about heroes or villains. He was only there for a good fight, and had the foreboding villain music in the background when he told Yusuke he liked the cut of his jib. So he didn't start off as a good guy, maybe a neutral party. He had no qualms destroying part of the audience by accident. But he's so happy! No one gave him a shot for a quality fight in a while, so he was ecstatic to fight Yusuke. When idle, he hangs out in the air, even during the fight, since he's the wind master. It's very wholesome when he monologues to himself about how beautiful it is from that high up. I love the sequences when he just flies around the ring to get his adrenaline going. I also like when Yusuke subverts our expectations and attacks Jin when he's taking a breather in the air. It seemed like whenever he did that, it was just for a bit of self-reflection for the viewer to get some exposition on Jin's personality. But nope, time is still moving and he's a live target. Though, the surprise attack let Jin show off that he can form tornadoes as a method of defense to redirect projectiles. His main technique is the Tornado Fist, which are super-powered high-speed wind punches. The only way to defeat him is to match his speed or just stop him head-on, both of which Yusuke does. Besides all of the great fight sequences with him, Jin is also carried by his personality. He's a fast-talking dude with an Irish accent who speaks in metaphors or just finds the most words as possible to say something. It's really a pick-your-favorite when looking at all of his lines, but I really like whenever he adds a woo and wee to his sentences.
Look at those straps of clothes covering himself. If the goal is to cover the nipples, it fails. If the goal is to cover his belly button, it also fails. It covers nothing. Especially when he's flying and it's flapping around in the breeze. You think it would really mess up his aerodynamics. Maybe it's his parachute just in case things go badly. That's why his pants are so baggy. He has parachute pants.
To match his happy-go-lucky nature, Jin joined the heroes in the final arc in the tournament to determine the Demon King, so we got to hear all of his phrases and see the wind again without him being a roadblock. Number 6, Yu Kaito. Kaito and his crew are not villainous at all, but but they were acting as villains for Master Genkai's test to help the heroes prepare for their next threat after the Dark Tournament, and boy did they put on a good show. I legitimately thought they were going to be the next threat. Kaito was joined by his friends Kido and Mitsunari, and the three of them worked together with their powers to trap the opponent, but Kaito always felt like the ringleader of the crew, being the smartest, so I generally consider him to be the main fight of this mini arc. These three high school students are psychics who can manipulate the rules of the area that they're in with their special powers. Kido can hold you in place when he's in the shadows, Mitsunari can copy appearances, and Kaito can set the rules of his boundaries, where if you say or do what's against the rules that he sets, he takes your soul. Genkai has them kidnap Yusuke, so the rest of the team has to find and rescue him. After getting to their mansion, the highlight is when we see the game Kaito sets up to determine their freedom. If you say a word that's forbidden, he takes your soul, but he compels you to say that word. Like when the word is hot, he raises the room temperature. The main fight against him is a battle of wits against Kurama, where, as time goes on, sounds or letters in the dub are eliminated from what they can say out loud until only one sound remains, and whoever makes a forbidden sound first loses their soul. Obviously, Kurama's gonna come out on top, or upside down, but Kaito has a good demeanor during all of this, smugly sitting there with the souls of Kurama's friends on his lap, and rattling off as many words that he could say with a letter that was about to disappear to show off. I also like how he calls Kurama by his human name Suichi, which makes sense since that's the name he knows Kurama by, but still it makes him feel like an arch rival using a name that we don't hear Kurama called often. Kaito's only downfall was Kurama surprising him with a face that was so funny he couldn't help but laugh and make the forbidden noises, and we'll never be able to see what it was, but surely it had to have been a knee slapper to make him lose his game of taboo. After beating Kaito, the heroes had to go through a labyrinth where one of them gets captured and replaced with a doppelganger. The major challenge that followed was Mitsunari takes the form of one of Yusuke's friends, and Yusuke has to determine which one was the fake. And it had a great punchline, where Yusuke punched Kuwabara at full force, revealing him to be the fake, with Yusuke's reasoning being Kuwabara was used to him punching him, so it would be a safe bet to guess him. But Yusuke also gave logical analysis why he chose Kuwabara. Still, I like the snarky response. And really, I like all four of these episodes where these guys were the antagonists. It's a very underrated part of Yu Yu Hakusho, being the bridge between the Dark Tournament and Chapter Black. It's goofy, it's fun, Botan plays an active role, and there's no fighting. Kaito sets up a very civilized game.
I mean, I have to say, Yu Kaito's whole plan seemed to be taken from like Friday Night Game Night. We gotta write down some crazy rules while playing charades. You can't use these special letters anymore.
I also like that as soon as they reveal that they were just faking being villains for Genkai's test, they immediately drop their confidence. Kido begs Genkai for forgiveness for failing her, and Kaito reveals that he needed help putting the souls back into the body. There's a charm to them. And to go with the sub-boss theme of this video, they were kind of like the sub-boss of the arc, being the fake-out villain challenge before the Sensui 7 unleashed hell.
It kind of pulled a nice bait and switch with it. It's like you get in a video game, you think you're fighting the final boss, and it's like, nope, just a sub-boss. You don't even know who the final boss is.
Number 5, Byakko. Byakko was a part of the Saint Beasts, who were a fun gauntlet of 4 demons of varying sizes with different elemental powers, or just whatever powers sounded cool. Byakko may have not been the Saint Beast right before the final boss Suzaku, but he definitely felt like the second toughest, making him the sub-boss of the Saint Beasts in spirit. Looking at his allies, the rock turtle Genbu was easy once you figured out his trick of phasing in and out of rock walls, and Seiryu was conceptually powerful with his ice abilities, but lost quickly to Hiei, so Byakko was the only other Saint Beast besides their leader Suzaku to last more than one episode, being in 3. Though part of his longevity was because he had to fight Kuwabara, who was the most inexperienced of the hero group, but still, it meant Byakko got to do a lot. Besides lasting as long as he did, he had a large array of powers beyond the other 2 short-lived Saint Beasts. Sometimes they fit with his theme of being a tiger demon, and other times it was just whatever powers made him a good impediment for Kuwabara. He's got extendable tiger claws and the tiger poster, and the tiger scream, which is a blast from his mouth that looks painful to get out. He has to grab his throat like it's sore to fire them. In terms of non-tiger abilities, he can also rip off his hairs and imbue imbue them with life to create some sort of indistinct quadrupedal demons. These are the type of demons that are threatening when the plot calls for it. Clever how Kuwabara gets them to all chase him single file, so he can stab them all at once with his spirit sword, and then he turns them into a donut. His last highlighted ability is energy absorption. When Kuwabara uses his spirit sword, it doesn't harm Byakuo. He just consumes the energy and physically gets bigger and wider as it happens. I'm not sure if all energy that touches him gets absorbed, or if he can turn it off, since that seems like it's prone to backfire, and it will. And how long can he hold the energy? When we see him post-defeat, he's back to his original size, so maybe he has control over it, or it gets lost after a certain period of time. Regardless, Kuwabara takes advantage of him growing by using as much energy against him as he can, until Byakuo becomes too big for the surface that he's on, and it collapses.
You really gambled at the incompetence of the structural engineers on this one. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be honest here, I don't think any part of that castle was HOA compliant.
Yeah, I mean, are they breaking any rules by having a stone guy that can fade into the walls?
Can't be OSHA compliant if I'm the wall. It's like, no, we need to have an extra railing here, and then the stone guy just becomes a railing, and it's like, bam, done.
That's actually pretty handy. I can't believe his allies were so rude by saying he was the worst of them all.
Yeah, I feel like everyone kind of bullies Genbu, but, you know, he thinks they're all his friends. It's really sad. You should have just gone home, got some real friends.
Isn't the castle already his home?
It is his home, that's true. That's even worse. He's letting all these people stay at his house for free, presumably, and they can't even be nice to him about it. I hope he left the house to somebody else than them. I mean, I guess they're all dead now, so it doesn't really matter that much.
Anyway, back to Byakuo. What adds to his challenge is the fight outside the castle was only step 1. He ends up falling into a room that's below the castle full of lava, and it turns into a video game, where Kuwabara has to keep hopping on elevated surfaces as Byakuo destroys them, or else he'll fall into the lava. This once again shows Byakuo's prominence, since he's the only Saint Beast with an extra room. Gee, Byakuo, how come your mom let you have 2 rooms? Kuwabara ends up outsmarting him by pole vaulting over to Byakuo's platform to knock him off and into the lava, but it was still pretty tense with how much of an advantage Byakuo had the whole time. And even falling in lava doesn't kill Byakuo. He comes back the next episode when the penultimate Saint Beast was about to be fought, asking him for help, but then he just gets frozen and killed off by his own ally. You could say it's because he's weaker than the Ice Saint Beast, but the dude just fell in lava. Give him a break.
I'm gonna be honest, you gotta really hand it to Kuwabara, because I would have given up like 5 minutes into that. Once there's lava involved, I'm taking the help. I'm tagging out. I don't even know why I'm here. I'm not some psychic detective.
Final note on why Byakuo seems so prominent. He was in the theme song. While the theme mostly features the heroes fighting a bunch of generic demons, they decided to highlight Byakuo, who just emerges from underground to chase Keiko and Botan. There's also 2 Genbu in a random group of demons. This Byakuo has a different toga on, so maybe they're just different demon lookalikes. But still, why did they like Byakuo's design enough to put him here? I've always wondered about this, but at least it made the theme song's visuals pretty hype. Number 4, Kamiya, aka Doctor. The Doctor was the first of the Sensui 7 that the heroes confronted head-on. No one was hiding in the shadows, they just track the issue, find the source, and then we have our interaction. Like the other humans in Sensui's group, he saw the evil actions of humanity on the chapter Black Tape, and now he wants to take humanity down, more so than the rest of the group. His plan was to covertly kill anyone who was his patient, since he wanted to rid the worlds of humans and no longer cared whether he lived or died, so he had nothing to lose. While some of his methods are grounded in science, he's still a psychic and can activate his territory when you enter his hospital. He modified the demon insects so they can infect and kill humans invisibly in the hospital, but he only really uses that as a blow-it-all-up option. He puts on a good facade as a normal person, even outing his plan but framing it on someone else being the killer. Once his cover is blown, we see he can actually fight, and it's incredibly creative how he can use his medical practices to turn himself into a fighter when in his territory. He can alter his body's chemistry to make himself feel stronger or more resistant. He increases adrenaline to give himself a boost of speed and strength, or cuts off his ability to feel pain so he can withstand real fighters. He can also perform quick surgery, reattaching any limbs that may get cut off in the fight, and he knows about about human biology, so he can target all of your pressure points as a way to stop you in your tracks. He's also apparently a doctor of many fields, since he can perform plastic surgery on himself to change his appearance as a way to hide. While Kamiya seemed irredeemable after being influenced by Sensui, since he never backs down against Yusuke, he was the first fight where Yusuke had to debate the moral dilemma of killing a human. Prior to this fight, anyone who died in a fight against Yusuke were either demons or died by their own weapon, so the doctor was the first human that made Yusuke have to use lethal force to prevent others from being killed. And I liked that they emphasized this issue to show that these characters are still people at the end of the day. Yusuke wanted to save him. Yusuke beats the doctor hard, but he does survive barely, with some awesome looking fight animation. I love when the animation goes all fluid and loose during the beatdown. In the end, the doctor was a great start to the line of villains, or just misled humans, that we were all soon to see. Number 3. Elder Toguro. Elder Toguro is a character who was established as the number 2 guy from the start of when we met him, with him being the older brother of the most well-known and popular antagonist of Yu Yu Hakusho, younger Toguro, and generally being by his side, you would expect him to get just as much prominence. At first, he was the silent guy who could twist into weapons to help his brother fight, and he was kinda creepy in the ways that he posed and just hung out there. Then he started talking in the Dark Tournament arc, and he was definitely creepy, the creepiest even, and way more immoral than his brother. We don't see too much of his personality until right before the finals of the Dark Tournament. We see how cruel and creepy he is in the fight against the team in the semifinals when Team Toguro fights, minus younger Toguro, which is fair since younger Toguro took on a team all by himself earlier, so he deserves a break. Elder Toguro takes on multiple opponents at once, and shows that he can stretch his body in all sorts of pointy ways without taking a new form. When 2 opponents survive, he kills the one who begs for his life, and tells the other one that his younger brother would recruit anyone who would accept their loss and potential death. However, Elder Toguro kills the other guy too, saying that he has a different philosophy from his brother, further exemplifying the difference between them. It reminds you that younger Toguro isn't particularly a bad guy, he just wants a good fight and doesn't have a policy against killing. Elder Toguro, on the other hand, likes to see you suffer. His big fight in the finals is against Kuwabara, where he explains more of his power. He can shift around his skin and body parts to both stretch himself to other parts of the arena and prevent you from hitting anything vital. He can also change the appearance of the skin that he shifts around to create a decoy, where he burrows under the ring, leaving a copy made of skin to set up a sneak attack, or he can just put on a puppet show. His favorite maneuver is the stretchy fingers. He loves just poking and prodding with them, or just swinging you around. He's got uses. He can also reconnect any parts of his body that you sever, so even making contact with him before he shifts around his body will likely just surprise him but not kill him. He can reform his clothes too. Neat. Kuwabara finds that the only way around all this body reorganization is to hit him all at once, so he reforms his spirit energy into a fly swatter of sorts. And there you go, brain, heart, and everything else hit in the same swipe, but that only defeats him for the match. He eventually reforms from under the ring during the Yusuke versus younger Toguro fight, since his molecules come back eventually. Once again, we see the difference between the two, since Elder Toguro suggests that they cheat now, or insults Genkai depending on the version that you watch, and younger Toguro takes offense at both of those actions, so he punches his brother's head out of the arena, and it's the last we'll ever see. Now he comes back. I discussed it in my one-off villain list, but he works for the villain of the Chapter Black arc Sensui next, who double-crosses him by having the short-lived villain Gourmet eat him to take his powers. But it ended up just being a double cross, since Toguro takes over Gourmet's body and mind, and fully heals himself from the Dark Tournament. Kurama demands to fight the returned villain, mostly because he was mad at the events prior in this arc, and he was done with Toguro at this point. Kurama sets him up with the Sinning Tree, which forces him to see his nightmares indefinitely until it drains his life, but since his powers prevent his life from being drained, he's there forever. And his reoccurring nightmare that we saw was that he simply could never defeat Kurama no matter how much he thought he killed him. That's it.
It's kind of scary that his recurring nightmare is that he can't successfully kill something. Like, you know, that's like my day-to-day life. Like, if it's just like, oh no, you ready for your nightmare? Yeah. You'll never defeat this guy. It's like, okay, is he gonna fight me? No? Oh, okay. I guess I'm just gonna chill out then. But for him, the very concept of it was horrifying.
Good thing he was hateable, or else you might second guess if this fate was cruel. Number 2, Shishi Wakamaru. Shishi is a part of Team Urameshi, which is a team whose members are all based on Japanese folklore. Back on my final boss list, I put their leader, the beautiful Suzuki, as the entry since he was the last fighter to face. But if you go by overall power and speaking role, Shishi Wakamaru feels like the guy to beat on the team. However, he loses out to Suzuki as the final boss of the team, since Suzuki is the guy who provided weapons and tools to all the team members, including Shishi. So Shishi would be nothing if it wasn't for Suzuki leading everyone, which is why Shishi is only the number 2 guy on the team. I like their subtle student-mentor vibe they have going on that you see more once they join the heroes. Shishi sits on Suzuki's shoulders in his imp form, and if he gets worked up, Suzuki's like, calm down, it's not a big deal. It makes me want to know more about their friendship. There's even a point where it looks like Shishi's going to be eaten by a demon in the final tournament, and Suzuki is devastated before it turns out Shishi's alright, making their bond seem real. It's also a hilarious scene where Suzuki screams with a dramatic freeze frame, and then time resumes, but he's still frozen until he snapped out of it. But back to when he was the villain in the Dark Tournament. Shishi was built up as the master swordsman who was the pretty face of the team when in his human form. He's got the standard arrogant persona, where he knows he's hot and doesn't think anyone can stop him, but the moment you piss him off or he gets ultra competitive, he lets the mask slip and shows a bit more of his demon form. His 2 main weapons are the Cape of No Return, which he throws at you to teleport you far away and make you look foolish, and his Banshee Shriek sword, which is where a majority of his techniques come from. He can scout out if you're strong enough to fight him by spinning it to create the shrill call of the Reaper, where if you don't have enough stamina, it just takes your soul. Then he can repurpose those souls into the Chorus of 1,000 Skulls, where skull heads fly everywhere and kill everything. He can guide them to his opponent, but they're pretty erratic where they just go for anything that moves.
I have to say, this tournament has a significantly high mortality percentage for being an audience member. The most dangerous of all the sports. I think you probably have a better chance of living if you are in the tournament than if you are an audience member. I mean, think about it. Like, if you're like in the tournament yourself, like, people don't always get killed, and frequently someone will just be beaten to a pulp and then they'll both go their other ways. But if you're an audience member, like, there's people getting set on fire, there's skulls, like, oh, it's so dangerous.
Unless you're a normal human in the audience related to a main character, then you have a good chance of surviving.
Yeah, any normal person would have ran. Kuwabara's sister was really down with almost watching him get killed a lot. He was like, yeah, that's what he gets. It's like, that's your brother, dude.
His last soul-related technique is the Cage of Hell, where he traps the opponent in some sort of oval-shaped barrier using the souls. Conceptually, it's cool, but it served no good purpose in the anime against Genkai, who just took some of the spirit energy from it to power herself up, so I'm not sold on this technique like I am with the skulls. And of course, he can do that demon transformation thing, which I can't tell if it has any advantage or if it's just him when he's enraged, but it's always intrigued me for how underutilized the full transformation was. He loses the fight against Genkai, but when he joins the heroes later on, we see more of his imp form, including a fight where he uses it to escape when he's ensnared in another demon's body. The main thing I like about when he goes into his chibi form is his sword turns into a needle. That's a cute little detail. I like how he stayed in his tiny form on default in the last arc and beyond. It's as if the stronger he got, the less he had to hide his true self. It doesn't matter how small he is if he has the skill to back it up. Team Toguro is so prolific, they get 2 villains on this list. Elder Toguro may have been second in command, but the presence and build-up of one of the other team members stuck with me more, initially making me more excited to see him fight over Elder Toguro, being number 1, Karasu. Younger Toguro elevates his whole team to prominence. Each fight of the finals of the Dark Tournament had us on the edge of our seats, so giving Team Toguro an extra rep on this list with Karasu was an easy choice.
I mean, and I have to say, one of the reasons why I think there's multiple sub-bosses for Togoro's team is basically because that was like the whole end of the series. It's like, you know, you get to that level in the game and it's just boss, 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 and then you fight the final boss.
End of the season, not the series.
Yeah, it was the end of the arc. The series could have ended there and it would have been a very good ending for the series. Like if they had said, you know what, this is it, it still would have been a great ending.
But the headliner of the team, Karasu, felt like the best sub-boss of the team. While Elder Toguro was the second to last in line, Karasu was the first up to fight against of the team, and he set the stage for how deadly the team will be. We knew what Elder Toguro was all about, having a similar backstory to his brother, just with less morals, but Karasu was a lot less enthused to be a part of the team. Him and the other non-Toguro of the team, Bui, were both there since they had previously lost to younger Toguro, and he saw great promise in them as fighters, so they could either join his team or die. While Karasu seems like he's fine being around the Toguro brothers, he has no attachment to them and would kill them if he could, but since he's stuck with them on good terms, he takes his time to enjoy his fights. His introduction was kind of like Elder Togoro's, in the sense that he was really creepy when interacting with who he'd be fighting against Team Urameshi, in this case Kurama. He just tells Kurama that he's going to die and fakes him out that he's about to use his powers against him, causing Kurama to have some nightmares about this, understandably so. And what are those powers, you may ask? Explosions. When we first see Karasu's powers in the semifinals, it appears that he can just touch you with his hands and it creates an explosion only harmful to the victim.
Sits down on the couch, there goes his couch, goes to get a glass of water, it breaks. He must be so thirsty all the time.
It's a bit more complex than just a single touch, but the idea that it's that easy for him to harm you is terrifying. The touch explosions are actually him setting bombs of demon energy on his opponents that he can control the power of, which is why the explosions are never strong enough to hurt him. But the bombs don't stop there. He gets more fancy with how they look, like his trace eyes, which are little demon-bat creatures that pursue you to explode, or a bomb that's in the shape of dynamite that goes off with a timer, or a bomb that clamps onto you from underground, or just a straight-up grenade without all that demon crap, or a grenade with all that demon crap. Lots of ways to blow you up. However, he has one final attack. His mask isn't just a fashion statement, it withholds his power. Once he breathes in without it, his hair turns blonde and he becomes the bomb. Now he can throw stronger bombs with a bit more recklessness, and if he gets hurt, he can just reform back to normal later on. He doesn't care about his allies or the bystanders, so the only downside of this attack is it gets a little messy and potentially harms himself. It's still pretty hard to harm him in this state, which is exemplified by Kurama needing to put one of his own demon plants inside of himself so he could ambush Karasu, which did eventually kill Karasu. But because Kurama had to pass out to kill him, Kurama was counted as down for the match, and Karasu, who was now dead, was declared the victor since he was standing during the life-sucking plant. Ironically, Team Togoro's only win against Team Urameshi came from a fight where their fighter died, and two of their fighters who lost survived. It shows how tough Karasu is, that he can beat you even in death, or that the only way to defeat him will almost result in your death. In the end, Karasu beat out his teammate Elder Toguro for this list, since we like his backstory of being the unwilling teammate better, and we simply think his powers are cooler, making Karasu the coolest secondary villain in Yu Yu Hakusho. Now, what did you think? Were all these villains good lead-ups to the main villain, or did some of them seem lamer than we remember? Or maybe they were so good that they deserve the status of being called a final boss? Who are some of your favorite underrated Yu Yu Hakusho villains, whether we discussed them or not? Let us know in the comments. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and we will see you in the next video.